I feel like one of the most important parts, if not the most important part of the job of a CTO, is to be that bridge from, is the business working, to how is this thing called technology that I am the chief officer of contributing to that business success.
Welcome to Tabletop, where tech meets the world, where CTOs share the tales and the comic stories. Startups do big names and their visions unfold. How many CTOs will share their stories untold?
Yeah, so welcome to How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast.
Yeah.
My name is Scott Porad. My co-host here is
Brad Hefta-Gaub.
And we're here to talk about what?
Well, you sent me
management.
You sent me a really interesting sort of list of topics that I think almost every engineering leader runs into at some point in their career.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like an endless amount to talk about on these topics. Do you want to kind of tee it up? Like,
well, yeah. So look, we could do that. That's just all I want to talk about. It's the only problems.
It's always the only problem of all businesses, right?
It's funny. I was just texting with a friend this morning, a guy who's a director of engineering somewhere. He was asking me how it's going. And what did I say to him? I said, well, we've got too much work and not enough people and lots of tech debt. Have you ever heard of a situation like that before?
Yeah. What if that never happens? That never ever happens.
I was going to say the topic on my mind is I've got this engineering team that I'm trying to uplift to help be better. I think the team doesn't feel like it's firing all pistons, and the stakeholders don't feel like it's firing on all pistons. And not all of that is the fault of the team. Certainly some of it is. I would say there are some historical and structural and cultural things in place which make it very hard for the team to thrive. But within that context, I'm doing my best.
Totally.
So let me tee up a topic for you.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I got many topics here to discuss, but I'll just start with this one. I'm going to ask you just general opinions. Then I'll give you some more detail so you can refine those so that they're relevant for you. So the topic is, how do you organize engineering teams to be most effective? And I'm going to give you just one. Well, I'm going to start there, and then I'll start adding more details. So what are your sort of philosophies or principles or ideas or thoughts on how to do that?
Yeah, that's a great rich vein of learnings and failures and successes. And man, I hate that my answer, my off the top answer is going to be, it depends. Right?
Do you know Kevin Goldsmith?
I don't.
Well, Kevin's a CTO. He was at Spotify a lot. He's a distro kid right now. Yeah. He just published a book. We'll have to get him on here. He just published a book called It Depends.
Yeah. Totally, right?
Well, what does it depend on? I mean, that's the question.
Well,
what does it depend on?
Okay, so here's my quick answer to that. It depends on what the high order bit challenges that the business and team are facing in the moment.
Okay.
Right. So a good example of this might be, let's say that let's say, for example, the stage of the software life cycle, like how old is the code? What state are you in a rebuild? Are you in a building stage? Are you like starting out, like the current venture that I'm working with? Like, we're so brand new, right? You have a once you're in the legacy code base stage, then you have to ask yourself, well, what are the problems that I'm facing right now, right? Like, you might have a problem where, like, it makes sense to have like one of the classic divisions in work managing your engineering team, and we saw this at the 98.6 where you and I were both together most recently, where you could say, like, oh, we have two distinct business problems that we want to kind of accomplish simultaneously. So let's have two fully fledged, fully autonomous, fully able to execute, fully equipped teams to go take on these two different business problems. Like, let's split it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also might be like, well, actually, these two business problems have the same fundamental foundation that they need to work on top of. So let's
Mm-hmm.
implement this with a platform team and then two application teams on top of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's those are two very different configurations of potentially the exact same problem statement where you intentionally choose two teams or three teams, right?
Okay, so let me ask you a few questions. First, I want to throw another "it depends" dimension in there, which is the profitability of the company.
Oh yeah, of course.
Uh, and this relates directly to the platform team that you proposed. And how it connects to that is in two ways. The first is, as an engineering manager, what am I holding the platform team accountable for? How do I measure whether they're being a successful platform team or an unsuccessful platform team? Is one dimension aspect there, and the other aspect there is, in my experience, the less profitable the company is, or if they're burning money and unprofitable, the harder it is to explain to the business why you need
Why
to
you need
invest in
platform.
these things that don't seem to really directly derive revenue
Totally.
or profits, whatever.
Yeah.
So my question for you is, let's set aside the business part of it. We'll get there. But if you have a platform team, how do you measure? And it doesn't have to be numerical. It could be quantitative, but I like numerical better. How do you measure if they're being successful? What is the measure of their success
I think that
in any form?
like straight out of the gate, there's a couple metrics that are just sort of like you put this on all teams and all software, which is like sort of the does it do what it's supposed to do metrics. So those are like
Mm-hmm.
mean time between failure, number of sort of like SLAs,
Mm-hmm.
any kind of SLA around uptime, any kind of SLA around performance metrics, like
Yep.
speediness of the services or whatever. So if you've got good quantitative metrics for measuring like does it work, right?
Yep. So you have that in place.
So you got that in place. So one measurement of the platform team is if it's not working, then that's a direct measurement of like, hey, platform team needs to make it work, right?
Yeah.
Or if it's not working well enough, right? Like it's you've got some, like you're at 3 nines and you want to be at 4 nines. You're at 4 nines and you want to be at 5 nines for whatever reason. Well, those are varying degrees of is it working, and so then you're measuring like, are you hitting the goal? And then of course, well, that makes sense, right? Like we agree on that basic idea
It
that
makes sense,
there's
and we
metrics for it works.
and we put this platform team in place so that each sort of application team wouldn't have to do this stuff on its own. We thought there was some leverage there.
Exactly.
We
thought there was leverage, right? We knew that there was this common substrate that the business wanted to go do multiple things. They like to have the freedom and the agility to move quickly on the multiple things. And the people building the multiple things, these applications or these higher level things, they're all like, gosh, we all need that substrate. We all need a reliable substrate to work on.
Yeah,
Or else
like
we're building it ourselves.
The perfect example, right?
Yeah.
Authentication and user accounts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We got this big SaaS product and a bunch of different things in it. We don't need two user databases.
Totally. Exactly. That's a great example. And so you get leverage. So like, okay, so we just assumed we assumed some facts not yet in evidence, right? We assumed that the business has multiple applications that it wants to accomplish, multiple application lines, multiple lines of business, multiple sort of paths. If you only have one path, if you're only building one thing, right? So again, I'm going to go back to your original meta question, like how do you organize a team? If you only have one application, I would be reluctant to make that platform application split, right?
Right.
because all you've done, if you don't have two applications or you don't have two use cases of the platform layer, all you've done by making that split is you just increased a barrier to communication, right? You've increased a barrier to autonomy. You've introduced roadblocks that you don't really get an advantage of, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds like in your case, you do have multiple kind of things you're trying to accomplish that are different enough that having them segregate from themselves about the things they're trying to accomplish, but borrow the common features like authentication,
Well, here's where my head's going, right? As soon as you have something like 10 engineers, such that you divide up into two work streams, so that group A is building, let's say all these 10 engineers are building consumer facing, user facing, not to be consumers, but user facing features and capabilities, right? And you just divide it in two so that, this team is doing one thing and this team is doing the other thing. Sort of as soon as you get to two, then all of a sudden the need for platform comes in, right?
Right. And the only question is, you can still have you can have the code architecture differentiation.
Yeah.
But not necessarily implement that through a team ownership.
Right. Well, I think what we see, I've seen more commonly is the opposite, which is you've got code that is a classic ball of mud. And then now you've piled many teams on this.
Yeah.
Not just two, but maybe it could be two. Usually with two, the team can work it out small enough that everyone can get in the same room and have a conversation, right? You got a team of 10 engineers. Let's just say, to keep it simple, you're going to have, a third of them are going to be senior engineers, a third of them are going to be mid-level, a third of them are junior. You can get everyone in a room and basically work out the details there. What happens, I've seen, is, well, now we're going to pile 15 teams on this thing.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't know, team 7 wants some feature in authentication and goes and just hacks it in there, because they're not really focused on authentication. They're focused on doing whatever they want to do to push whatever business goal that some product manager brought to them ahead.
Right, totally.
And okay, so team 7 does that, but then, every team does that once a year for 7 years.
Right.
And you've got, what's 15 times 7? It's like, you get 100 hacks on the authentication system.
Right. Totally.
And now it's just a brittle mess. And somebody comes along and says, hey, let's make this integrate with Okta or something. I don't know, I'm making this up. And it's just like, oh my God, this is a disaster. And so then someone says, well, we need a platform team to own authentication. And then the platform team is supposed to somehow go like extract all this out of the monolith. And then, so that's like their first big project, extract it out into some nice service. Right. And then sort of their customer becomes the product,
all the other teams.
All the other teams.
Yeah.
And like rinse, lather, repeat about for however many domains you have in your application, which let's just say it's going to be somewhere between 7 and 15.
Right, but what's okay? So like, if we rewind though, like I think that I totally understand the way you're going, and it's the way that we almost always go, right? Like we immediately start having the conversation about the teams and who's the ownership. And I guess the thing that I would say is maybe that's what we should be challenging, and that the first principle is not how we divide who's responsible, but maybe the first principle needs to be, are we aligned on sort of like the code paradigms? Like, are we aligned on what we consider correctness to be? Because what I think your story is really telling, your story is saying, like, every time the team went in, all the 7 different teams, and went in and they sort of like, layered on their opinion on the authentication service, right? it sounds like in that history, which of course you've come too late, right? Like we always show up as the CTO hired to fix things, and it's like, yeah, there's already 10 years of history, right?
Right.
But to me, it's like the reason that a lot of organizations go with, well, I need a platform team, the authentication team, and they own the code, they own the authentication code, and they become essentially gatekeepers of the functionality and the code itself. And you know what you're partly what you're saying is we need someone to give a damn. We need someone to give a damn about this code and to defend it and to be its steward, to be its code steward. And a very, very easy way to do that, or a way to sort of like enforce that, is we're going to give you a team, we're going to make you get control, and everyone has to come through you.
Yeah,
but
so
that's not the only way to solve that code.
That is true. Now this is interesting because I've been kind of going a different direction recently, but I want to explore, and I'll tell you what that is, but I want to explore this for a second. It comes back to that profitability question. If I am a profitable business, okay, let's assume the features of my authentication system have been defined. It's all set. The system has been built. It is operating correctly. A less profitable business will say, I need to redirect these resources to go and work on something to make me more profitable. A more profitable business will say, okay, well, I can afford to have a team here just maintaining this thing, right? Because there is a maintenance cost to it, and I can afford that.
Totally.
But a less profitable business will say, I can't actually afford that right now. Right. I need to put as many resources as I can. I need to devote to getting the profitability.
Right.
I think that adds another dimension of complexity there, which is the give a damn. It's hard for an unprofitable business to continue to give a damn, right? Because they want to continue to have people that give a damn. So you said there's other ways to accomplish that besides having a team. What would that be?
I have to rewind to sort of give you the answer to that, but let me kind of give the answer and then I'll rewind. This is something you and I have talked about. The rewind we've talked about is, you know, the classic question whenever you're looking at a organization you're trying to up level, you have to answer the question like, is it a people, process, or tech problem, right? And it's almost always a combination of the three, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my partial answer to there's ways to give a damn is you can institute things like clearly articulating accountability for changes to code, right? So for example, you can say all code must be, you can implement processes that sort of force give a damn on code that is community owned, right? Like it's the comedy, it's the tragedy of the commons, right? Is the problem that we're trying to deal with. And so
that's true.
And so the solutions to the tragedy of the commons is, you know, yeah, you can put a armed guard up and make everybody go through them, right?
Yeah.
Or you can create that's the team that owns authentication, or you can create a culture where everyone values the commons.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, right. Yeah, that's very interesting, right? Because in that unprofitable business, the less profitable the business is, the less the commons are valued.
Well, and it's funny that you say that. That's a really great line. It's funny. I was on my run this morning and I was thinking about getting together and talking with you about this. And I was like, you know what's interesting? I think software engineers, computer scientists, the people that we hire as basically like in our teams, right? I think that they have a natural kind of innate knack for understanding if things work or are working. And they don't always necessarily have the answers to how to make it work, but they definitely know when something's not working, right? And I think that applies to not just their code and the way they think about building code, but I think that applies to they look around the organization, and if they might not be able to tell you, hey, I know why this business isn't profitable, but they probably get this sense when it's not profitable, like there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just the business, but it could also be the processes, right? Like if you've got processes in place and they're just like, yeah, I'm following the process, but it just seems wrong, they wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you how to change the process, but they're definitely going to have this instinct of like, something's not right about this process. And the same would be true for culture, right? And so, yeah, I think that like getting really clear with like don't bullshit an engineer, right? Like getting really clear with them, like, hey guys, like the auth system is fucked up, right? We agree, right?
Yeah, we agree.
And someone's gonna go like, yeah, you're right, it's fucked up. Right?
Well, you mentioned it.
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned an interesting thing about culture, which is what I've seen in a lot of places, is where sort of the business side of things, the business side of things is focused on how should I say this right? Because the business and the engineering, they all have the same goals. But I'm trying to say is, I don't know how to describe this exactly. Let me do my best. When the near-term business requirements, and those near-term could still be within a couple of years, when the relatively near-term business requirements and demands and focus overwhelm the caretaking of the commons, right? And so the business is kind of cutting off its nose to spite its face, right? But it's really hard to explain to a business person the value of those commons, because we can't put it in, the language they speak is dollars and cents, right?
Yeah.
And so when I say, look, when an engineering leader, myself, says, look, trust me, you do not want to let the authentication system decay.
Right.
And they're like, yeah, but tell me how that affects my P&L.
Right, exactly.
Because that's the score, because I'm playing a game and that's the scorecard I use.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I don't really, so it's interesting. So we talk about culture, but it's interesting. The part of that culture, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is the balance, or the balance between sort of, in the tragedy of the commons, you got the commons, and then I guess you got the consumers of the commons, right? I don't know what you call those people, but it's the balance between those things. And I guess as engineering leaders, it's our job to really build into, it's hard, but to build into the culture that the business, the consumers of the commons understand the value of it, so they want to caretake it, because they understand that caring for the commons is caring for their own business, their own people.
Well, and so 100% agree with that point, right? Like if we're basically like talking about like, the simple example of the commons is like, it's the public square and there's litter all over the place, right?
Right.
Well, this is there's an element of like, if enough people say, I'm going to clean up the litter and I'm not going to ever litter, then eventually like it becomes like, if it's completely strewed with garbage, then you're going to have to do some kind of intervention. But if you can prevent the garbage and the litter from piling up, then you're better off. Now, the one thing I'll challenge you a little bit here, because I think that one interpretation of this is to say, hey, business owners, you're pushing the team in such a way that they're unable to maintain the commons, right? And yes, that happens. And yes, you got to work that side of the equation to be like, hey, business owners, like we need to think about your ROI. We need to think about this tipping point where if you never maintain your authentication system, here's your ROI on your authentication system. If it falls over and gets broken, then none of your customers can use your software and use your product at all. And then your whole business goes to zero. And in that particular example, right, like you can retell the stories of past lives, right? Because that was one of the very real issues that we dealt with in our past life, where we used this external authentication provider, and it was the thing bringing down our SLA, right? Like it
Oh,
was,
really?
it was the thing that prevented people from, patients and doctors, from logging into the app, right?
Interesting.
And it was like, we're like getting these, we're getting these like, try zero, problems, like, hey, the authentication is down, and we had to make the case, like, we got to get off of this system. It's killing us.
I've been kind of advocating for a slightly different direction with my team.
Yeah.
So now, I told you when we first started talking, general thoughts. Now we'll just dial in a little bit.
Yeah, dial in.
Okay. I've got 120 engineers, plus product managers, designers, et cetera, all hacking on one monolith that is 15 years old. As you can imagine, the tech debt is high. Cycle time, velocity, whatever you want to say, the ability to get things done rapidly and nimbly is slow.
Yeah.
It's a multinational app, meaning it serves US, Canada, and Europe. So there's complications just in that by itself. So, and everyone's unhappy with everyone. Business people are unhappy with how long things take. There's legitimate reasons things take long, like, hey, we got to do it for all these countries. Like it's just, there's just a bunch of work there, but there's, a lot of it's driven by tech debt, a lot of it's driven by org, et cetera. Okay, so this org is designed, as you would kind of think, there's an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, applications on top, software as a service on top of it. That's the kind of idea. And the frustration I've had is, like, when I say to sort of the platform person, how do you know if you are doing a good job? Right. If you were to present me a single slide with no more than 7 KPIs on it, which tell me the story of, here's how you know if my team is doing a good job.
Right.
What would be on it?
Right.
And it's like, because that platform layer has many different domains in it, it's like, well, it's all over the place. Right. So I'm kind of contemplating a shift, and I think it's an appropriate shift for, you said it depends, for this phase.
Hold on a second. Before you talk about your shift, I want to ask you a question. When you asked that platform leader for their KPIs of their platform's performance, in your mind's eye, what did you have their answer being?
I don't know. I mean, there's the correctness piece, right?
The correctness piece that's on the list.
Are these?
And then I have another one. I have a second one.
Are these systems up and running properly, and are they secure and compliant, things like that? That's very easily. But what I didn't know is how to measure what is the value that these systems are providing to the business. When you say, hey, platform guy, you've got 38 engineers working on stuff to move this business ahead towards its goals. Mm-hmm. How would you justify, or maybe not justify isn't the right word, but how would you illustrate or explain, this is how this is how I know if my team is doing a good job moving the business ahead? And I guess maybe to me, just, that sort of correctness uptime layer, is the system working, is insufficient.
Totally, it is. Right. There's another big half of this I think you have to also include in that list.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is effectively, are my customers happy with my product?
Right.
And my customers are the application developers building on top of my platform as a service. And how do I measure their happiness? Their happiness is going to be something like the velocity that my customers report back about their ability to move quickly because of my platform. And so then so for example, I might have, like, I can come up with several different, like, quantitative measures for that. So it might be something like, velocity / story points of application teams that touch platform APIs, right? Mm-hmm. So if you can measure, like, application teams build, new features at a rate of, X units per week.
Well, you're essentially getting into your DORA metrics, the cycle time of your application teams.
Exactly. You want your cycle time of your application teams to be the metric of, is your platform delivering value?
Okay, this is like a whole other 74 podcasts we could talk about in terms of velocity. But let's assume that's correct for a second. I did not talk to you about this in advance because you were actually walking into my trap.
Go ahead. Now tell me your plan.
Well, I sort of said to myself, fundamentally, we're having these platform teams because we think they are making our, what I refer to as product teams or application teams. We think they're making the application teams faster. That's why we do it.
The app teams get leverage from the fact that we have a platform.
That's why we do it. So I've kind of taken these, but not all of them. Some of the platform teams, we do it because we think it saves us money, like actual dollars and cents.
Like you could, a platform team that owns authentication could.
I'll give you a concrete example. We have a payments and commerce team, right? And they're working on things like, a simple project that we're going to. It's not simple, but like a straightforward one to explain is different types of retries when things fail. Like we have transactions that fail, and we sometimes don't actually. The transaction happens through the application, and we have money transact, but we actually don't ever collect it from someone's credit card, so we lose money, right? And so, for instance, a variety of reasons, right? It could be bugs, it could be design of the system, whatever. And so they're working at making us collect a greater percentage of our actual money so that we're more profitable. That's what they're focused on. Okay, so I've taken all these platform teams and infrastructure teams and put them into two categories. And there's some imperfection here because nothing is ever just one thing.
Yeah, of course.
But the two categories are, you're either, your primary focus is generally trying to generate velocity or reduce cycle time, or your primary focus is trying to reduce cost. Actually, I should say it differently than reduce cost, because this is a sticking point with me. Your primary focus is to operate within the cost budget that has been allocated for this thing, right? Because I could reduce, as I say all the time, I can reduce the cost to zero by turning it off.
Right.
So,
exactly. Continue to deliver your service in the envelope of the budget we gave you.
Right. So, and the cost, I also say this, the cost is balanced by that correctness.
Of course.
Meaning there are those
and arguably by that velocity too. Like eventually you get, if you get sophisticated enough about this, the cost of your platform, if your platform costs you a little bit more, but it generates way higher velocity from your app teams, you may choose that trade-off. You might choose
that is right. So I guess, so both teams, the velocity team and the cost team are both have a guardrail, which is correctness. And then on top of the correctness, one is focused, you need to operate within the budget we have, which is, X dollars per transaction or cents per transaction, what it is. And the other is you need to reduce our cycle times by whatever target we have. And so the reason I'm kind of trying to move that direction is, I mentioned we have about 120 engineers here, and each of those teams, that group of people is, let's just say 50 people altogether. And so I can divide those up. I have a leader for each of those groups, and I can say to that leader very clearly, hey, Brad, your goal, we have budgeted $1.18 per transaction in cost this year, between hosting and credit card fees and all that kind of stuff. Your job is to keep the system correct and operate the system within that budget. And if you're doing that job, then if you can come to me and say, look, Scott, I'm doing this.
Right.
You're doing a good job.
Yeah, exactly.
High five, right?
Yeah.
And so,
and hell, if you can even beat that number, then higher five. But that's your goal, is to hit that number.
Goal is to hit that number. And within the, say, 25 people that we've divvied up equally, you're empowered to figure out how to get there.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And same with the velocity person. I can say, look, your goal is correctness, and then figuring out how to reduce the cycle time of these application teams, and you get to choose how to do that.
Yeah, totally.
And if you can come, and so what I like about this approach is it is sort of outcome centric. It is not software centric. Now, the challenge with this approach is Conway's law,
Right.
as always. But we've already got I already have a Conway's law problem, which is it's a monolith anyhow.
Yeah.
So, and we need to decompose the monolith, and maybe that velocity team will say, hey, we think the best way to improve cycle time is to yank some stuff out of this monolith.
Yeah.
Or maybe they think it'll make the development environment better. Or maybe they think it'll be to make the staging or the CI/CD pipelines better. I don't know what, right?
Okay.
Maybe it's refactoring the front end framework one more time. Or
I love everything you're saying.
What do you think of this idea?
I love everything you're saying. The one of the questions that pops to my mind is, how have you solved the ownership give a damn problem? I assume that these two teams are both operating within the same portion of the monolith.
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, like, I haven't totally, okay, how to solve the give a damn problem.
Do they share code?
Well, everybody shares code because it's all one big thing.
Right.
But look, let's think about this. In the velocity team, right? So one of the things I'm trying to do with this is not kind of have the teams within there be as defined, or at least giving these teams the ability to redefine them as they see fit. But the ones that I'm taking and bucketing together in the velocity space is what we call the web and mobile platform team. So those are basically the teams that are making it easier for our web and mobile developers to
build cool
do
shit
their work.
On top of it. Yeah.
Yep. And I should note for the audience, right? I'm working on a consumer internet product, right? Consumer internet service, right? That's what I'm doing here. So it's basically web and mobile clients with a backend.
Yeah.
It's pretty standard. Databases, messaging, pretty ordinary. So in that velocity group, we got the web and mobile. We have a test automation team. We've got there's 4 in there. There's test automation. We have a quote unquote developer experience team, which kind of ends up becoming the junk drawer team.
Yeah.
In theory, they're supposed to actually be working on engineering velocity.
If you don't have a junk drawer team, you aren't really in business, I guess.
It's true. But they're supposed to be the engineering velocity team, but they're kind of end up being the junk drawer team. And then we have this thing that we call core services, right? Which is like where authentication fits. Okay. On the cost side, we've got DevOps, security, payments, like I mentioned to you, and what's the 4th one? Support. Support experience and that kind of thing in terms of helping our support agents be more efficient or resolving issues, depending on things getting to our supports. Those are the cost sides of it.
Yeah.
So we've got this little bucket right now, which this little team that we call core services, which is the bucket that owns, like, what are the projects on their roadmap for like the next year or 6 months, whatever. Upgrading authentication, upgrading the message bus, right? So like they kind of own those pieces. The payments team sort of owns the commerce piece. The support team sort of owns the commerce, the support tooling, but they're all kind of within this big monolith.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's other parts that
okay, so have you rolled this out?
Well, no, I'm just having this conversation with people now to talk. I'm trying to say, like, hey, I think we could be more effective.
Socializing the idea.
Yeah, I think we could be more effective.
What's the reaction?
Well, I get a lot of funny looks because people want to have it. They hear about Conway's law and they say, well, we want to have the organization reflect the software we want to have, which is an infrastructure layer, a platform layer, an application layer. And to my response is, I get it. But what I'm actually thinking about is kind of a management / effectiveness. I'm really thinking about that thing, which is, as a leader of a team, as a leader of a group, or even a team, how do I tell people if I'm doing a good job? Because I actually think this is going to get to another thing, which is like a hot topic for a whole other conversation. I think our industry has a disease, and the disease is we're a bunch of people for whom straight A's isn't good enough. And so, like, we have all these engineering teams, and nobody ever knows if they're doing a good job, and the pressure on them is immense to always do more, because businesses by their nature always want to have more. And I think that causes a lot of unhealth and dysfunction, and frankly lack of effectiveness. And I think I've probably told you this before. Back a couple of companies ago, we had an operations, we were running an online business. We had a weekly or maybe monthly operations review where all these different teams had metrics. And I remember this one situation that really struck me. There was somebody, they had an SLA. I can't remember exactly what it was. Let's just say they had an SLA of something had to happen under like 10 seconds. Okay. And we're doing this review, and the person who leads that group says, well, last month we were at 12 seconds. We did some work. We got it back down under our SLA at 10. It's down to 7 seconds. And we got some more things we're going to work on this month to get it to 5. And I just remember turning to that person saying, I don't get it. Like, you're within the SLA. Why would you keep on working on that when you got other problems to solve? Or implicit in that statement is, if there's nothing to do, then we should go reapply those engineers to work on something else
100%.
In our business, because our business has agreed that 10 seconds here is a satisfactory SLA for this thing. And what struck me about that so much was that feeling of being good enough. I wanted to say to this person, like, hey, you're good enough. You've achieved the goal. Like, be happy. And there's this illness in our industry, which we are never satisfied. Ever. And so part of what I want engineering leaders to be able to say, this is how I can tell you if my team is doing a good job, is I actually believe that, well, that's important in itself. It will create positivity, and success begets success. And then morale will be positive, and there's be a bunch of positive things that come out of it over the constant, like, we're not doing enough, we're not doing it fast enough, nothing's ever good enough, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Okay. So everything that you just said, resonates with me. And I think that, again, like, I would kind of go back to first principles. And I think that the challenge of saying to a group or an individual engineer, an engineering team, a group of engineering teams, the challenge of saying to them of what does success look like for you? Well, how do you know if you are delivering value, right?
Management 101.
It's management 101, right? And I think that this is to me the most important part. I feel like one of the most important parts, if not the most important part of the job of a CTO, how many CTOs does it take, is being that bridge between we are a business, and there's no question about how the business is measured to be a success. Is it profitable? That's the only answer that matters as a business. To be that bridge from, is the business working, to how is this thing called technology that I am the chief officer of contributing to that business success, positively or negatively? And what am I doing to make it positive, right? And that bridge, that mapping of the business to the why we even have a technology group at all, that's the core of our job as CTOs.
I say this all the time. If they could do it faster, better, cheaper with smoke signals. Smoke signals were once modern technology.
Exactly.
They would do it that way. Today, interconnected apps are modern technology. That's how they're doing it. In the future, it's going to be something else that they're going to do with.
Totally.
This is just a means to an end. Minor point, I will take issue that the goal is not always profitability, but we'll set that aside second.
Sure. Business, whatever the business objective is, let's be clear about that. Because it could be could be hyper growth, it could be whatever, right? Yeah, but ultimately, in capitalism, it's ultimately in capitalism. It's
at some point it becomes about profit. So yeah, that's right. I think what you're saying is, well, what I hear you saying is, our job is to connect what we do with the people who've hired us to do it. And to me, this approach is going to do that better.
Right. And well, here's the point, right? I said bridge, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got to explain to the business owners, like, why do we fucking matter at all? Like, why do you even have us? Why aren't you just using smoke signals? You should be using us because ... Right?
Yeah.
You're explaining to the business owners that. But you also have to be the bridge. We also, as CTOs, have to be the bridge to these engineers to connect them to the business, right?
Yeah.
Because as I said earlier, like innately, they know when something's not working, right? They know if we're treating them like mushrooms, right? They're not gonna stand by to be just kept in the dark and fed shit, right? They know that they have this innate sense that are they adding value? Is the business working? Is my contribution doing something, right?
Yeah.
So helping them connect that, helping both sides of this conversation connect, that's the key.
I think that's right. I mean, I feel like I'm getting validation for this notion of where I'm trying to push my team.
Oh,
Is
100%.
that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
It
And
is BHG approved. I'll tell everyone that.
It's BHG approved. But I'm also sort of saying, like, I think part of your next step is to socialize this, connect with your engineers by helping them really interrogate the question of how am I adding value to the business?
That's part of it. And I'll add another thing. I'm trying to put the engineers in a position which engineers are good at, which is solving problems.
Totally.
If you give engineers are smart, not unusually smart, but they tend to be a smarter lot. And if you say, look, here's a chart and make this go up and to the left or down to the right or whatever you want to say, they will find ways to do it. They're smart.
Yeah.
Like,
give an engineer a problem solved. Give an engineer the wrong problem solved.
That's right. We're so busy climbing up the ladder, we neglected to realize it was leaning against the wrong house.
Exactly.
So that's exactly right. Part of me feels like by zooming out a little bit and saying to an engineering leader and a group of engineers, this is the metric I want you to move. Not these are the software systems I want you to run, but this is the metric I want you to move. We'll free them to do what they're good at and probably do some things that aren't very sexy, which will make a real difference. So I'll give you a concrete example. There's all this talk in our organization about, like, let's build these teams to build these new platform domain services, blah, blah, blah. But there's these other people saying, our development environment is really slow. And it's hard the monolith is so big that it's kind of hard to run locally. And it makes it really hard to test things. And also, our business, it's hard to get the data in the right condition for doing QA. So we don't do a lot of QA locally.
Yeah.
So
huge problem.
There's other people out there saying, if we want to help engineers go faster, fix these problems. Don't make yet another domain service that's halfway complete and doesn't have a team to maintain it. And
totally. And I think that's a great example of, right, what I said earlier, which you had already kind of come up to the conclusion yourself. I was saying, like, a measurement of a platform team is correctness, cost of running it, and then are my customers happy? Customers being these developers that are using the platform, right?
And the measurement of happy is cycle time.
And the measurement of happy is probably cycle time, right? But that's a great example where okay, so let's play this out. Should I work on making build times faster and local debugging practicable? Or should I add a new authentication layer that is, one function call and everything else gets handled, right? Whatever. I'm just making up two examples. Those are both great sounding projects. One of them improves one or both of them, but one of them improves the cycle time of more teams more than the other. And whichever one it is the one they should be empowered to go do.
That's right. And that's their choice.
Yeah. But they need to have it through that framing, right?
The
framing is not, well, I added more APIs, right? Like the classic, like, how to measure engineering efficiency, right? The joke of clocks, like let's use 1,000 lines of code as our measurement, right? It's the world's worst measurement of engineering efficiency. But you could pick 100 quantitative metrics for a platform team that would all effectively be clocks, right? Like number of APIs,
Right.
Who fucking cares? An API is not an API unless it's being used to improve the, cycle time of your app teams.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Brad, this has been helpful today. I feel like I've solved it.
All right. How many CTOs does it take?
In this case, two. I'm just going to take this recording. I'm going to sit my whole team down, like when we were in elementary school and the teacher rolled out the VHS cart.
Yeah.
And actually, pre-VHS cart for me, it was rolled out the film projector.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say, kids, watch this video.
Love it. Well, I love to hear. Let's get together a week from today, and we'll hear about what kind of resistance you ran into in trying to pitch this idea.
Yeah, well, I've been socializing it for the last week, and the resistance isn't strong. It's just not quite how people imagine it. There's been a little bit of a culture of a lot of people have been involved in improving velocity, and they're concerned about, well, if I still want to be involved in that. And I'm trying to say, look, it's not that I'm not saying we're only putting our velocity efforts into this one team. I'm just trying to say, like, this is how this team can tell us if they're doing a good job, and this is how this other team can tell us, the cost team, this is how they can tell us if they're doing a good job.
Yeah.
And it's not perfectly clean, because I mentioned, for instance, that payments team. Well, they're also working on some new capabilities for payments, like, the ability to do, say, buy now, pay later, that kind of thing, right? So it's not perfectly clean. But at least directionally, it allows me to say to a group of people, like, this is the target, and this is the target the business cares about.
Yeah. It's not wrong to have multiple metrics that you're shooting for. And so maybe having them both have both metrics is reasonable, but tell them that you currently want the dial of the one team set aggressively towards improved velocity of your users, and you want the dial of the other team set more aggressively towards, hit your cost metric, run your service correctly in the cost envelope that we've given you. And the fact that, in Q2 2024, that's where I've set the dials. We might come back in Q3 or Q4 and adjust your dials slightly differently.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, this was another really great episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast. My co-host, Scott Porad. I'm Brad Hefta-Gaub. Thanks for taking the time to listen. We hope you got something out of it. I know I got something out of this conversation. And what do we like to say, Scott? Remember to smash that subscribe button, rate and review, and thanks again for spending time with us today. This episode of How Many CTOs Does It Take podcast was edited by Saffron Hefta-Gaub. Our theme song was AI generated by Brad. Please follow us on all the social media platforms at How Many CTOs Pod. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, X, TikTok, and Patreon, or at our website at howmanyctospod.com. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Thanks for listening.